Ian Garry gave me the business a couple of months ago. I did not like it, I must tell you. And not because when I giveth, I can't taketh. Not that. I didn't like it because when he gave me the business, it was a retort to me defending him. And I knew by the tone that he rebuked me that he had not heard what I said, that somebody else had told him and that somebody else had told him wrong. I ended up in a fight one time with Chris Curtis over the same thing. You guys know Curtis. Curtis is as tough and rugged as an old leather boot, right? But he's as sensitive. Right. That's when he's in the cage. The rest of the time, the rest of his life, he is the most nice. You can hurt his feelings and he will let you know. He will let you know, right? That's a different level of sensitive. Right? That's a guy that really is in touch with himself. Curtis is going to go on. He's going to make some woman very happy. I'm telling you. He's going to go on and write poetry. This guy's a different kind of guy. He's very kind. He just has an aggressive side that he can bring out for 15 minutes, and he goes back to being very kind. So when I get into a social media dispute with Curtis, I didn't want to be there because I didn't want to hurt a guy's feelings. That's totally different. Being mean is totally different than actually hurting somebody's feelings. Talking trash is totally different than telling the truth. When I talk trash about a guy, very seldomly tell the truth that hurts, right? Okay. I tell you this because I thought that Garry was getting a lot of bad information. I thought that he was handling his PR wrong. And the mere fact of how he came, it was very small. You probably wouldn't have even noticed it. It was very small, but I noticed it. And I thought that spoke volumes to my other hypothesis that he's getting bad info. That is my larger point to his public rebuke of my defense of him. All right. So, 2 days ago, there's something out of a town called New York City. It lives on something called the internet, and it's called the MMA Hour. It's with somebody called Ariel Helwani. Ariel has Rampage Jackson on. Now, for my money, Rampage is as good of an interview as this sport has ever seen, and I don't know why he doesn't get mentioned. I get asked about it all the time. I would get personal questions about me and Conor, me versus Conor. And I always think, hey, you guys are missing one. Or Bisping will get pulled in. DC, later in his career, started doing a great job giving you guys scripts. But I feel you're missing one. I feel you're missing Rampage. That was the original guy for me. That was the first guy ever for me in all of my experiences. Anywhere that touched my orbit, that was the first guy where after a fight, you would tell the living room, quiet, 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 so you could hear his interview. Never before or since. Anyway, Rampage goes on, Ariel's show. And Rampage cuts a promo on Ian Garry. And he says, and Rampage has a new podcast. He's doing a great job, by the way. He's got this new podcast, and he invited Ian Garry to come on. So, just knowing Rampage, I don't believe Rampage invited Ian Garry to come on. Just knowing Rampage, he has somebody that asked Ian Garry to come on and did it for his show. And I know that we're playing a game with vernacular there, but it is important to understand that way of speaking because it would also help explain how Rampage could have had a detail off. It's just a really hard thing to pass a message and get it correctly. It's an old game we used to play, and I trust that you guys did too, but we played it when I was growing up called Telephone. And we played in kindergarten where we would all sit in a circle. So one kid would think of something, and he would whisper it to the kid next to him, who would whisper it to the kid next to him, who would whisper it to the kid, and it would go all the way around in a circle. Get back to, and when they said it, they would say it out loud, and it would be nothing like what the first guy said. It's a game of telephone. It is It is so telling for life. It is so, I hope they play that in kindergartens everywhere. You need to know that about gossip. It is such a meaningful lesson, but people think it's a silly game and they forget. So I tell you this because I don't think that Rampage directly contacted Ian Garry. And Rampage said, I contacted Ian Garry and he wouldn't come on my podcast. And Rampage is telling the story on Ariel's program, right? So now we got to give him a telephone anyway. Now, and I'm recapping that. So now we got this game going that I'm very speaking about. And Rampage says he didn't come on because he was afraid he would get teased. He was afraid he would get lambasted. And then Rampage proceeds to say, man, I wouldn't have done that. I don't even know anything about him. Like, I'm hearing a rumor that his wife lives with the boyfriend and, under the one roof and Gary's paying the rent. I mean, things like this, right? Like, Rampage is bringing these things in, re-digging up the entire WAG Amazon situation while doing it from a standpoint of, I don't even know what's going on here. It was brilliant. Only Rampage can do it, right? Like, if you're Ian Garry, not going on Rampage's show was the single best decision you've made in a period of time. You would have to grow up with Rampage. You would have to grow up in his neighborhood in Memphis and hang out with his buddies from your youth to know how to deal with what Rampage is going to bring you. He is simply one of the best. It's important that you know that. There's a reason they took him out of nowhere and put him in a secondary position on one of the great action hits of the entire summer when they redid the 18. Like you can't just do that with anybody. Even Conor, they took him for a role. It was very small. He says a couple of lines. Rampage, second biggest star on the screen for an A-budget film. It's a very big deal with no experience. So Garry comes out and he rebukes Rampage. But see, now it's made me think of my rebuke differently. Because if I thought that Garry had come at me with a tone that a young man should not, a young up-and-comer in this sport should not have come at me the way that Garry did. That was nothing compared to what he did to Rampage. And so, but now I look at it differently and go, okay, well, hey, maybe I just don't know Garry. Maybe this is what Garry does. Maybe Gary's skin is a little bit thicker. He knew when he came at me, he was going to get some bumps back. And if he's a guy that's sensitive to bumps, you don't come at me. The same thing goes for Rampage. And Garry laid him out. I mean, Garry went for, and there's certain things that just work. New versus old, it just works. Who was fighting, guys? Was it Tito versus Randy? Is that what it was? And Tito came out, and he's got the cane at the press conference. Is that who it was? There's a part of me that thinks that was Chuck, but Chuck just never would have done that. And Tito would. I can't remember if it actually was, but I think it was. And that works. Either way, it works. If Tito comes out with the cane because Randy's an old man, when that fight is over, see, that's when you find out if something worked. When it's over, how does it look? Well, that would have worked. Would have been exactly what Tito said. I am the new, he is the old, bring me in and put me in the spotlight, which they were going to do anyway if he won. But hey, this is an old, decrepit man, and I'm a new young kid. If Randy beats him, shines Randy brighter. It shines him brighter. It brings in a whole demographic that I now currently live in that gets to cling and come back and say, yes, the world does not belong to 18 to 25-year-olds. It just works. It works. Either way of the result of the outcome, the marketing for it shines the winner brighter. It was great by Tito. But that will always work. The young versus old, the new guy versus the old guy. I don't know if Rampage is in the Hall of Fame. Did they put him in yet? Rampage Jackson for sure will be in the Hall of Fame. No, I'm not sure if he is in it yet. So, my point of Ian Garry, who is completely undefeated, he is a red-hot name. He is a handsome guy. My point of him coming after Rampage and being the new face versus the old, it works. It'll never quit working. It would have been a big deal had Garry let this go, had Garry let this slide. And there's also a pettiness to it. Many of you didn't know that Rampage had a podcast until I just shared that with you. And many of you didn't love Rampage's segment on Ariel's show the other night. That's not a bad thing. Ariel has guys on that are getting ready for announcements and these different things, right? It's a different spot. So it would have been very easy for Garry, who has a feature match on pay-per-view 1 month away, to do this to Rampage. Never happened. Just ignore him. But there's something about the pettiness that he did not ignore him that is very charming. And it's one of my favorite things about the character of Garry, the gimmick, in the first place. And frankly, I'm glad it's back.